Something is not adding up. And what I'm about to show you might completely change how you see this entire situation. Because just hours ago, a claim came out that sounded like it could stop a war. Donald Trump said the United States had productive talks with Iran. Productive, calm, positive. But then, within minutes, Iran responded. And what they said shocked everyone. They didn't just deny it, they called it completely fake. Fake news. Now think about that for a second. One side is saying peace talks are happening. The other side is saying nothing happened at all. So now the question becomes, who is lying? Or maybe both are telling the truth in a very different way. And trust me, what I found next is where things start to get really uncomfortable. Because this didn't just come out of nowhere. There's a much bigger story behind this. And once you see it, you won't look at this situation the same way again. Let me explain why this is such a big deal. This is not just about a statement. This is about war, peace, and global power. Because if Trump is telling the truth, that means behind the scenes, something massive is happening. Secret diplomacy, backdoor negotiations, a possible path to stopping escalation. But if Iran is telling the truth, then this could be something much darker. A narrative being created, a message being pushed, a psychological move. And here's the scary part. Both of these possibilities are dangerous. Because in today's world, perception is power. What people believe shapes reality. And right now, millions of people are watching this unfold in real time. But here's where things get even more interesting. Because to understand what's really happening, you have to understand Trump himself. Trump doesn't just make statements, he creates moments. He understands something most politicians don't, that attention is everything. And throughout his career, he has used bold claims, unexpected announcements, and dramatic messaging to control the narrative. Now think about this. When you say we are having productive talks, what does that do? It calms markets. It signals control. It makes it look like you are leading the situation. But here's the twist. What if the goal is not just communication? What if the goal is influence? Because in geopolitics, words are not just words. They are tools. They shape reactions. They move markets. They send signals to allies and enemies at the same time. And just when it feels like you're starting to understand this move, Iran responds. And their response changes everything. They didn't hesitate. They didn't stay quiet. They came out and said clearly, this is fake. No talks, no negotiations, nothing. Now pause here for a second, because this is not a small denial. This is a complete rejection. It's like two completely different realities are being presented to the world at the same time. And now you're stuck in the middle trying to figure out which one is real. But here's where it gets even more confusing. Because sometimes, both sides can deny and confirm something at the same time. Sounds impossible, right? But stay with me, because this is where the real story begins. What if there are no official talks, but there are still conversations happening? What if nothing is being signed, but messages are still being sent? This is what experts call backchannel communication. And this is where things get really interesting. Because in global conflicts, countries don't always talk directly. Sometimes they use intermediaries, other governments, secret envoys, quiet messages passed behind closed doors. So technically, you can say, we are talking, and the other side can say, we are not talking, and both statements can be true. Now think about how crazy that is, and suddenly, this entire situation starts to look very different. But here's the part that really caught my attention. Because once I started looking deeper, I realized something else. Something even bigger. This might not just be diplomacy. This might be psychological warfare. Let that sink in. Because when two powerful sides are in conflict, every word becomes a weapon. Every statement becomes strategy. And sometimes, the goal is not to tell the truth. The goal is to control perception. Because if people believe talks are happening, It reduces panic. If people believe there are no talks, it increases pressure. So both sides are shaping different narratives for different audiences. And now you're watching a battle, not just on the ground, but in the minds of millions of people. And just when you think it can't get more intense, the internet steps in. Because the moment this news broke, social media exploded. People were confused, angry, curious. Some were saying Trump is revealing something secret. Others were saying this is misinformation. Some believed diplomacy is happening quietly. Others believed this is manipulation. And within minutes, the internet turned this into a battlefield of opinions, memes, arguments, theories, everyone trying to figure out what's real. And here's the most interesting part. People weren't just reacting, they were choosing sides. Because in today's world, information is not just consumed, it's believed. And once people choose what they believe, that becomes their reality. But then, a bigger question started to emerge. Who is actually telling the truth? Because at the end of the day, someone is not being completely honest. Either talks are happening, or they're not. But the deeper you look, the more complicated it becomes. Because truth in modern politics is not always black and white. Sometimes it's layered, sometimes it's hidden, sometimes it's controlled. And that's when I realized something important. This story is not just about Trump. It's not just about Iran. It's about something much bigger. It's about how truth itself is changing. Because we are living in a time where information moves faster than facts, where statements create reality before verification even begins, where perception spreads globally in seconds. And by the time the truth comes out, people have already decided what they believe. So, in a way, this situation is a perfect example of the modern world. Two sides, two narratives, one reality that no one fully understands. And maybe that's the point. Because when everything feels uncertain, power belongs to the one who controls the story. And right now, both sides are trying to do exactly that. So the real question is not just, are talks happening? The real question is, what are we being made to believe, and why? And that question is far more powerful. Because stories like this, they don't just happen. They shape opinions, they influence decisions, they move entire nations. And sometimes, they reveal something deeper about the world we live in. A world where truth is no longer simple, where reality is constantly shifting, where you have to question everything, even the headlines, even the statements, even the denials. So now I want to ask you something. After everything you've seen, everything you've heard, everything you've just understood, what do you believe? Do you think talks are happening secretly? Do you think this is political strategy? Or do you think this is something else entirely? Because your answer says more than you think. And if you want more breakdowns like this, where we don't just report the news, we decode it, we question it, we go deeper than the headlines, then make sure you subscribe, because the next story might be even bigger than this one, and trust me, you won't want to miss it.